Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Southern Outdoorsman Podcast. Today, we're discussing Mr. Jason Redd's episode and doing some listener questions, which you can find at the end of the podcast. We've got timestamps down below if you want to skip ahead to those parts. But for now, we're going to talk about that episode and opening weekend here in Alabama. So, Jacob, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Andrew, how are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. I'm ready to get back in the woods.
Yeah, well, listen. Well, I'll say this, get back in the woods. I think we've already talked about this, but you killed a deer opening day.
Yes.
So we're going to talk about that. Very interesting story. But before we get into any of that kind of stuff, this week's episode with Jason Redd, talking about hunting roaming bucks, has been fascinating. It's been really well received, first off, by a lot of listeners. But second off, it was fascinating getting a guy on like that, because Jason's been a guy I've been wanting to get on the podcast for a little while, just because of his experience level, where he lives in the country, getting kind of western North Carolina. It is a very tough area to hunt. Kind of follows along with, I guess, similar conversations to Adam and Heath Jolly, who live over there. They're friends with Jason. And it's just fascinating how these guys like Jason have the discipline, but the drive to go hunt in an area with very low deer numbers.
Yeah.
And put in a ton of miles, a ton of elevation gain in order to try to go hunt like specific deer. Mm-hmm. And it's just fascinating because, again, thankfully we're in an area of the country or the area of the Southeast that we have pretty good deer numbers. Even when you go into an area with lower deer numbers, it's still pretty good. Mm-hmm. And they're talking about Jason goes and hunts 8 individual bucks. He's like, I don't have to worry about any other deer busting me because there's not any.
Because they don't exist.
It's just him probably on that side of the mountain. So yeah, that's super fascinating. But
I was a little bit surprised by some of the stuff he was saying about hunting that rub line where he killed that buck coming down that rub line. But I was also interested to hear how well they stick to cover out there, where if he goes and finds like some kind of thicket that is good for browse and whatnot, that they're probably going to be in there, and you should be able to go in there and actually find sign, which is what he was saying. And that's one thing I never know with how to approach those lower deer density areas is how much sign is like acceptable sign. Like how much are you looking for that'll tip you off that you're actually in a good area? Because we dealt with the opposite problem on our Georgia hunt this year, where there was so much deer sign that we couldn't like narrow it down because we're like, oh, it all looks good. But it all kind of looked the same, but it all looked really good compared to what we're used to. And so I was kind of interested in hearing Jason's take on the difference with just a low deer density area. Like he's still looking for the same stuff. It sounds like it would still be like an acceptable level of deer sign where you get in there and you'd be like, yeah, this looks good. Yeah. You kind of have a gut feeling about it.
Well, and it's also, another thing that I thought was kind of interesting is like his takeaway of like, the bucks specifically, a lot of these mature bucks like being on these north-facing slopes.
Yep.
Even into late season, even when it gets cold, they're on north-facing slopes. So they're just toughing it out, okay? And then also how once leaf fall happens, before leaf fall happens, before, of course, you lose all the foliage
Foliage
on trees. They'll be a little bit lower, but when that happens, they go up higher in elevation.
Yeah.
Which was, again, interesting. He's like, anytime I go into a new spot, I'm always going to go high. Like, start high and kind of work my way from there.
Yeah, that was interesting.
And just all that kind of coming about of being, most times when you hear about guys hunting mountains, okay, or hunting hill country, they're like south-facing slopes, south-facing slopes, south-facing slopes. And he's like, Aaron down, then that might be a factor. But he's like, if I'm going to find an immature buck by himself, he's not going to be on a north-facing slope.
Yeah, I found that interesting.
Which also, if you think about it, is probably going to be even less sign you're going to find there because there's probably not many other deer on a north-facing slope, especially kind of getting later in the season. So it's like you are truly hunting that ghost of a buck.
Yeah.
That, like, you're like, he's here somewhere. And then, like, all of a sudden you start cutting some tracks or cutting some rubs, and you're kind of, like, working your way back into it. But I feel like that is a very, very challenging style hunting. Like all the props to guys like Jason that go out there and do that kind of stuff, because it's like, you are truly hunting, at certain times, and he's talked about this buck he's been trying to kill for a while now, like a ghost of a buck. Like the deer is like, he's there, but you can't put all the pins on the deer. You can't really put your finger on exactly how his movement's going. You just know he's in this general area, and at some point maybe we'll have an opportunity to be able to shoot that deer.
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to what I was talking with our friend Rocky Smith about,
Hmm.
which he's been on the podcast a couple times. And again, if you want to go find those episodes with Rocky, you can go to our website and actually search those. If you go to that home page, which is the podcast page, there's a little search bar at the very top of the podcast feed, and you can just type in whoever's name you want. You know, Rocky Smith, Glenn Solomon, Josh Driver, Richard Fott, and you can find all their episodes like that very easily. Um, and get that episode number. But I talked to similar stuff. I talked about similar stuff with Rocky, and he kind of said the same thing. He's like, "Yeah, you're looking for sign, but it's just like kind of desolate out there."
Hmm.
Like I think they said almost the exact same phrase. I can't remember what it was. Like, be prepared for like desolation or something. Like there's just you're not gonna see a lot of deer. And Rocky was the same way with this buck he was hunting last year in this one specific area where I think he told me he saw 3 bucks all year, and the third one was that huge buck that he ended up killing.
Hmm.
That was the third deer he saw, and Jason was talking about a very very similar situation. And also, I found it interesting where Jason was talking about aggressive terrain
Hmm.
and keying in on that aggressive terrain and being able to find deer using the really really steep stuff, which now you can easily identify with slope angle shading on something
Hmm.
like Onyx and going right to that stuff and finding the deer actually using that aggressive terrain, which is something that a lot of other hunters have talked about, including Adam Turner, who hunts in North Georgia. We
Hmm.
had him on last year. He talked his whole episode. I think his episode was called like "Aggressive Terrain for Mature Bucks" or something like that, because it's such a factor for a lot of guys in those areas where they're looking for that more rough, rugged terrain because it seems to hold those bigger deer. So I found that interesting as well.
Yeah. No, and also, one thing I found interesting with Jason is how, during bow season, like, he's had success, early in the season, also late in the season during bow season, but also, kind of capitalize on muzzleloader and rifle opportunities by using that as a way to kind of scout your way back into a new area that you might want to explore with a rifle.
Hmm.
But how, one thing, we never really asked him this, but like, it almost seemed like the way he described getting into some of these spots, he's using a lot of drainage systems to get back into some areas.
Hmm.
Um, and he's talking about like kind of following these drainage systems and kind of hitting a drainage or a creek and kind of running it up the ridge and kind of using it as a lot of his access point. He probably doesn't do that all the time, but he does it at some points because he mentioned the episode. But how much that plays a factor as well for like getting into some of these areas a little more undetected, because if you have a creek that you can run up with as well, I think it helps with your sound a ton. Especially like you've gone in some of these areas where like there's so much leaf litter, it's like impossible to like get in quietly. Like
Yeah.
kind of goes back to Stuart Keene from a month ago now,
Yeah.
where he was talking about some of these areas, especially like on these really cold, crisp, calm mornings, it's like
Hmm.
impossible to get any spot clean because you're just making so much noise. You got the frost on the ground on all the leaves. The leaves are already loud, but like you're just trudging through all that stuff, and it just is super loud and obnoxious. And
Yeah.
some of the bucks may key in on it and be like, I don't want to go that way. I'll kind of slip out the back door.
Hmm.
But having those creek drainages and everything that you can kind of slip up with those ditches could be super helpful. But also, talk about rhododendron, or rhodo as he called it.
Yep. Roto.
Yeah, and I'm like, God, after like seeing that stuff in Tennessee a lot, like around Gatlinburg, it is insane how dense it can get.
Yeah.
And if it's following any of those, like, got probably mountain laurel, a little bit more on the creeks, rhododendron, maybe a little higher in elevation. If you get stuck in a patch of that, like he said, like even like with Onyx, like
Hmm.
walking through that stuff when you have a track, how easy you can get turned around in it,
Yeah.
it's insane. So it's like you have all these factors as a mountain hunter that you got to overcome, and then you got to execute a shot on it.
Yep. Yeah, that's
Like,
that's pretty wild. I also like the part he said about uh, basically locating spots that other hunters aren't keying in on by basically parking in a place where you have to bushwhack and or just eat a giant hill as
mhm.
soon as you leave the truck. Like parking in a spot where you're climbing as soon as you leave the truck. And I just found that interesting because that's something that really anybody can apply. Because the principle of it, when you strip it down, is like just park next to something that sucks to walk through, whether that be a giant hill or a thicket or just whatever the case may be, big creek, like
So yeah.
whatever the case is, that people aren't going to walk through that
Mhm.
thing or people aren't going to want to walk through it. And actually, Michael Baugh from Arkansas,
Mhm.
does the same thing in flat river bottom country, where he's walking through a thicket, and I think he talked about going like a 3/4 of a mile around through a swamp. When you could walk to the same spot off the road like 150 yards, but he's like, I'm bushwhacking and I'm going around through this hellhole because that's what it's allowing me to get into that spot clean. And that's why he's killing the bucks that no one else is killing. You know, if you park at the same spot and go hunt the same spot that everybody else hunts, you're going to get the same results as them. You know, so you might luck into one every once in a while, but to be consistent, you got to do stuff different than everybody else. And so that just kind of stuck out to me because that's just yet another one of those things that the principle of it applies to a lot of different people. You know, that we interview. So Michael Ball is not, you know, eating a giant mountain right off the truck because he lives in flat river bottom country, but he's doing the same thing in essence.
But and I'll say this, another thing that kind of helps with like the whole getting away from people, when you're doing 3.5 miles one way into a spot to go,
insane.
I might would do that. Maybe not. It depends on how rough that stuff is. I'm sure Jason's hunting some really rough stuff, but like, you know, on a gun hunt, okay.
Yeah.
A bow hunt,
negative.
I don't know.
I don't know, man. It'd have to be a really. Not in Alabama.
There's no place in Alabama I could think about walk. I mean,
because we did not 3, but we did
2.5.
2.5, but it wasn't really a hard walk. I
No.
mean, it's just it wasn't that hard of a walk. It was just long.
Yeah, but like again,
and that's where you killed your buck last year.
Yeah. But what I'm saying is, I don't know how many guys during bow season are going to be punching in 3.5 miles to go hunt an individual deer one way. So he's doing 7 miles round trip.
Man, not many.
And also, he mentioned the day we recorded with him, he had been out there that morning. So he did 7 miles that morning.
Oh yeah, he seemed fresh.
And
like
he's like,
good to go.
He's like, yeah, man, it's, you know,
Dude's in shape.
Didn't kill him today. You know, no big deal. I'm like, dang, dude.
Well, that's what, and that's another thing where him and Rocky kind of really tie in together. You to hunt like that, to be that kind of hunter, you really have to enjoy what you're doing. And not be so hyper focused on the end goal. So it's not for everybody. I mean, you have to enjoy like that solitude, that physically demanding hunt, and just pushing back into an area that few people ever go to, and that has to be what kind of trips your trigger, you know. And getting the big buck is obviously the end goal, but that can't be like the ultimate defining factor of whether or not you enjoy what you're doing.
Yeah.
In that situation, because man, that's. Yeah, it'd be a long, miserable season for you. So,
God,
yeah.
I can't imagine. It kind of goes back to like again some of the other guys that we've interviewed from the mountains. You know, Nathan Killen, Devin Duncan, Jim Forbes, again Adam Heath Jolly, just like these guys that hunt high elevation, you know, lower deer numbered areas, typically lower deer density. And just like the drive, and I think also part of it, I remember Devin Duncan talking about this. When you're born and raised in that kind of stuff, it's normal for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
It's normal, like the suck factor of having to hike in a few miles to go hunt in a low deer number area with low amount of mature bucks.
Yeah.
It's different when you come from an area maybe like us, where it's like more rolling hill, like more gentle, way more gentle terrain compared to theirs, other than like a pine thicket or something.
Yeah.
And a lot higher deer numbers to then go hunt something like that. You're like, oh, this is miserable, dude. But for them, it's like it's everyday thing. It's like they don't, you know, unless you go hunt other places, you don't know any different. It's just what you do.
Well, one time, this is like years ago. We were on a me and my buddy Zach Eccles. We were hunting a particular WMA that's in the more southern part of Alabama, more flat. It's where we're talking about hunting in January. You know what I'm talking about? Second half of January. So we went and scouted there, and we ran into 2 guys from Florida, and we were talking to them, and they're like, "Man, we came up here just to see the hills." And I'm like, "See the hills?" Like, and we were on that place. We were like way back on that place. They're like, "Yeah, we just got up here, and like, we couldn't believe the hills." I'm like, "What? Like, are you messing with me right now?" I was like, "Yeah, it was weird." It was super weird. I'm like, I don't know what part of Florida you're from, but like I'm pretty sure I've seen hills like this in Florida. But anyways, yeah, it just depends on where you're from, like you're talking about.
Yeah, that's super interesting. It's all relative to where you're from, but no, again, a fascinating episode. Interesting guy. And one thing about Jason that we didn't even get to go into much detail in this episode with, really no detail, is he likes to do a lot of backpacking whitetail camps and whitetail trips in some of those mountains. Well, he'll go in and for a couple nights, sleep sleep back there on the mountain, and do that, and kind of already be in the general area of kind of where he wants to hunt. And I would like to do another episode on that. We did an episode on that with Damon Bungard, God, 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
Yeah, it's been
now.
a while.
And Damon, again, another friend of ours, who's from Tennessee. I don't know where does he live?
I think he lives in Virginia now.
Okay. But he would always do a backpack trip in Tennessee, in some of the mountains, some public land during muzzledeer season, and had really good success killing some nice deer doing that. And he'd go in for a few days and just backpack camping. It's something that there's certain areas in the Southeast you can do it on, as in like you have like that. First off, you have like the size national forest or place to be able to do it at, that has the regulations where you can actually go, camp some spots.
Yep.
But it's a cool opportunity, like to be able to kind of do that. Like we used to do that back in high school, not like backpack into the spots, but go do a little camp in the middle of nowhere, wake up and just walk out your tent to go hunt,
strike out.
And dude, me and my old buddy Marshall Brooks, dude, he killed a nice deer with us doing that one morning. Very nice buck, 11 point that he'd killed. Well, I say we killed. It was a team effort. I want to tell that quick story, dude.
Story.
Yeah, we went into that spot, man. A little power line that ran through right next to the old clear cut, and we had gone back there and quote unquote scout. We didn't know what the hell we were doing. Like 16 years old, didn't know what the hell we were doing. And it was during gun season in Arkansas. He had a Benelli shotgun with slugs, and I had a borrowed some kind of percussion cap muzzleloader. With an octagon barrel, little like 18-inch barrel, like small little,
like a Hawkins style.
Yeah, very much. Yeah,
all right.
Percussion cap and everything.
Let's go.
And anyway,
Mountain Man Jacob.
Yeah, iron sights. Oh, it was. Now looking back at it, it was so dumb. I don't know how much powder we were putting down in that gun.
You just eyeballing it.
I don't know how we measured it. I really don't. I just remember throwing powder in, and then also, I didn't know Sabot slugs for the first year or so using a muzzleloader, because I was using that one of those borrowed guns. That you had like Sabot muzzleloader bullets where you had like the plastic sleeve that the bullet would sit in and ram it down.
Yeah.
We were using a patch and ball, like a cleaning patch. Okay, unlubed, because you're supposed to lube them. Unlubed with like a 44 caliber like pistol bullet just shoved down in the gun. It was, again,
wait, like a bullet or a round ball? Were you shooting a ball?
No, we were shooting bullets too.
What?
Yeah, I know. It didn't make sense. You should have shot a round ball on that gun.
Like a bullet. We just had bullets laying around.
Yeah.
Like just the bullet, not the casing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to clarify that.
Yeah, like I
don't know what
like
you're
you
doing.
could buy like some.
I thought you didn't know what you're doing. I don't know if you're freaking ramming
like
a 44 mag down the barrel.
No, like Hornady XTP or whatever. Like the actual bullet, like the lead bullet, no
What?
casing.
Oh my gosh.
So like, again, patch and ball. You should have been patch and ball, not patch and bullet. Okay. And so that thing was tumbling. I don't know. Again, we were making a pipe bomb.
Gosh.
Not knowing what we were doing.
That's terrible.
And the funny thing is, we actually killed a deer doing that.
And you don't know who hit the deer.
Well, that's a different story. But yeah, that also had Marshall involved with it.
Wait, I thought you said I thought that was a story you were telling.
No, this is a different story. This is the story of him killing the big buck.
Oh,
so
and you were just out there with a pipe bomb.
Yeah, and also
Did you end up shooting it?
Yeah. Yes. So this.
What'd you shoot it at?
The buck.
Oh my gosh.
So
wait, hold on. The 11 point?
Yeah.
What the hell?
So let me tell it.
Okay, I'm confused.
So that morning we woke up out of the tent, and this is also the night. So I had like a little 40, or I had like a 55-degree sleeping bag. It got down to like in the 20s at night.
Okay.
So I was freezing going to sleep. I'm wearing bibs, jacket, and everything, and I had hand warmers. And I've told the story before. I put hand warmers in my pockets. And this is back when hand warmers were actually like hot. Okay.
Dude, come on. When I was a kid, it would hurt you.
Yeah.
And now they don't. They barely even get warm.
Yeah. So anyways, I had them in my pants pockets. And I went to sleep, and I woke up screaming in the middle of the night because I thought my leg was on fire. And I flipped up.
That's the kind of hand warmers we need to bring back.
And, dude, we ought to figure that
Southern
out.
Outdoorsman hand warmers.
Yeah, freaking dangerous.
Come with a warning label.
Warning label on it.
Second degree burns.
Yeah, but anyways, so I woke up straight, and Marshall's like, "What the hell's going on?" And it's like 1 o'clock in the morning, And I pull a hand warmer out, and I have like this huge red welt, dude, on my freaking thigh. And anyway, so we woke up that morning, a couple hours later, and I go to load this muzzleloader, and I just dumping powder, patch bullet, not ball, should have been a ball, but
Nice.
bullet down there, unlued, like again, zero accuracy. This is really bad, really bad. Well, this muzzleloader had a wooden ramrod with a brass tip on it. Okay, which I've never seen. Like most of them, all the muzzleloaders I've seen is always like a fiberglass or some other kind of
I got
composite.
a Hawken with a. I got that same gun, except it's a 50 cal.
Yeah. So we went to go pull this. I went to go shove the bullet down. Okay, and I get it like 3/4 of the way down, and I break the ramrod. And then I finish. I'm of course pissed. I'm like, oh crap, now what? Because I broke the ramrod first off. Second off, the bullet's like 3/4 of the way down the gun, and we used like a tent pole or something, and like rammed it down with a tent pole until I got it down where I thought it was seated. I'm like, okay, good. Well, I got one shot. That's all I got because I'm not carrying a tent pole.
Like old
with
Barney Fife.
Yeah, I'm not carrying a tent pole with me when we go in the woods. So me and Marshall, we leave out. We're like, hey, we're gonna go sit this power line, and we're just gonna maybe we'll have a deer cross by.
You're gonna launch one at 150 yards with that thing.
So instead of sitting on the power line, it's like a real small power line. It's only like 10 yards wide, and it kind of it went across this big valley. So like this on the property that we accessed to hunt. It was like the whole valley was clear cut on one side, and the other side of the valley, it was big timber that we were camping in, and the power line just went right across that valley, and it was bluff walls on each side. And like the deer would run right below those bluff walls.
That was a good spot.
Yeah, well, we should have sat on it worked out. We should have sat on the power line. Well, we get up to the top of the power line where we're going to go sit, below the bluff wall. I'm like, I don't know where we can, it's so exposed, like you're in the wide open. Like, let's just get in the woods a little bit. So we got in the woods on these big limestone rocks that we sat on. And daylight happens. Didn't really hear anything. I'm tired. I'm like laying down on a rock. Okay, and Marshall's like leaning up against this rock, and he's tall. He's like 6'5", dude, with his shotgun. He's huge, and he's leaning up against this rock, and all of a sudden he said, Jacob, do you hear that? And I'm like, what? And like kind of got up, and I was like, and he's like, I hear something walking, and I like pulled my beanie up and everything so I could hear like just deer walking.
Yep.
And I'm gonna grunt at him. This is like November, like their gun season opens like the 11th, 12th, 13th, something like that. I grunted on a grunt call a couple times, and all of a sudden it went from like a walk to like a full out run right towards us. And we're looking down at the power line. The power line's right next to us. And all of a sudden we see antlers, and the buck comes out, and he comes in that power line, and I'm like, oh my God, he's a good deer, like big chocolate horn rack deer. And I'm like, oh, holy crap. And he like turns broadside. His hair's all bristled up. His ears are laid back, dude. Like he was ready to fight. And I was like, Marshall, shoot him. So like Marshall drew his shotgun and went boom. It did like 25 yards with a slug. He shoots, and the deer like just stands there, and it's all hunched up, and I can see where he hit it with the muzzleloader. He hit it like towards that back rib.
Shotgun.
Oh yeah, sorry, shotgun slug. And the deer stood there. Well, he racks another round and shoots, and he isn't looking down the barrel, and he shoots right at the top of the deer. So I'm like, I'm gonna shoot him. So I pull that percussion cap. I pull that hammer back on that muzzleloader, freaking try to lean around a tree, smoke the tree. I shoot this pine tree, and this pine tree goes like, whoosh, and just like just fragments everywhere. And at that point, the deer was like, I'm getting out of here, even though he had already been hit. And he like runs down the hill. And long story short, Marshall, yeah. Anyways, deer finally died. Okay.
Yep.
We'll just cut to the chase. Deer finally died. We get down there. It's a really nice buck. He's a mainframe 8-point, and he's got this like second main beam coming off his left side. I think it's his left side. Comes off, and it crab claws out to 3 points. And a pretty awesome deer. But we shot that deer. We drug it all the way back to camp. We had other guys staying at camp with us that weren't hunting. They were just hanging out in camp. Some other students, and they all freaked out when they saw the deer. But yeah, I look back to some of those days when we were hunting with that muzzleloader, because I had to go find another ramrod, and I'm like, I don't know where you get like a wooden ramrod.
No,
because I could have had like after that I bought a CVA Optima, which was like technology night and day different from this other one I was using.
bet.
And I'm like, oh yeah, man, you can use sabot slugs and everything else, and actually have some accuracy. But
And that sent Jacob down the journey he's been on ever since with muzzleloaders.
oh yeah, oh man, how have things have changed, man.
How times have changed.
God, but yeah, that was crazy. How did we get on that story?
I don't know. That's pretty good though. This Subi story has been brought to you by.
Yeah,
I don't know what.
But anyways, it was a crazy little experience. But it kind of goes back to like just what we did as kids, like unsupervised hunting, and didn't know what the hell we were doing.
Man, for real. I got some good stories like that too. Like just me and Colton especially, because I mean we grew up. I feel like probably a lot of people actually grew up. A lot of people that listen to this podcast, like they'd give us we'd be like, I don't know, 10 or so, and they'd give us each a 22 rifle or a 20 gauge, and say have fun. And we would just go strike out into the woods, like out of Colton's grandparents' back door, and we would just go out and just be out all day, killing all manner of songbirds and squirrels and all kinds of stuff, and freaking cooking them over a little fire. Like, man, we just had the best childhood. So, I don't know. I hope kids are still doing that today. Just let them go do it, man. Let 'em go do the thing.
Dude, I've told this before, but I'll say it again. We did, while we were out there was a couple farm ponds we'd go fish in. They were on trot lines and stuff. But we were catching crappie in this one little pond. And some guys that were like fishing with me, they're like, man, let's cook one up. And I'm like, okay. So like flayed up this little crappie. I think we just put it on like some sticks over the fire, just a fillet, no seasoning. By the way, so this is coming out of cattle pond, just full of cow crap. Okay, and
yeah,
anyways, but no seasoning, no salt, no pepper, nothing. Just let's cook it over and just eat it.
Yep.
Actually, we didn't even flay it. I think we just scaled it and stuck it on the fire.
Yeah, delicious.
And I'm telling you, it was mushy, just
it tastes like a
cow water,
cow patty.
Oh, dude, it was nasty.
Seasoned up.
You just
the sucker been marinated.
It like touch your tongue and you're like, done.
Does it taste like mud or something?
Yeah, it was just nasty. Oh, dude, it was just not good. I mean, I think you could have seasoned it up and probably done better, but also I think it was undercooked, so it was like mushy, like
oh yeah,
not done all the way. Unseasoned fish, just not great. And it came out of a cow pond. That was, I mean, there's cows crapping everywhere in the pond.
Man,
yeah.
Well, we used to go down and small game hunt when we got our driver's license. We go down to that WMA I mentioned before and just like squirrel hunt and whatnot, duck hunt. Just kind of go around the woods with shotguns and just kind of hunt stuff. Well, one time, me and Zach were down there and we went squirrel hunting, and I think we'd killed a couple squirrels that day, but somehow or another, all of our food in our cooler had gone bad. I don't know what happened, but we had like no food, and we didn't have enough money to drive to the nearest town to like go to the grocery store or whatever. And so Zach went out because we'd seen all these ducks in the swamp. Zach went out and goes and freaking water swats a duck.
Please tell me it was duck season.
It was duck season.
Okay. First question.
It was duck season. So Zach goes out in this marsh and
make sure it's not like September 30th or something.
He water swats a duck out in this marsh, and he's got his knee boots on, and he tries to go wade out there after it. And of course, it is like nipple deep where the duck died. And doesn't have waders, he's got knee boots. So he goes out there and he's trying to get it with a stick, and he falls in, and then he just has to go get it. So he's soaking wet. And then Zach has to like walk back to the truck to go change. And we're parked on like a main road that goes back into this area. And I mean, poor Zach, dude. He's sitting there trying to get all of his clothes out and everything. And he's standing on the side of the road, just, I mean, butt ass naked. And this other hunter comes rolling by. Zach like makes eye contact with him. It was really weird. So we went through that. Zach had shot a gadwall, okay? I don't know much about gadwalls, but, man, we got back. We were so excited because we'd always heard about how good, like ducks are to eat, like mallards or whatever. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think a gadwall is like what people call a puddle duck or a dabbler duck, not a diver duck. So it's not supposed to be like a fish-eating duck. And so we were, like, really excited because we knew that puddle ducks were supposed to be, like, really good eating. And, man, we got back, cooked that sucker over an open campfire or whatever, had, like, the fat cap on it, like, sizzling. We're like, oh, this is going to be so good. And then,
well done.
No, we cooked it. We didn't cook it well done or anything. But, man, we ate that thing, and, it tasted just like fish. I mean, just like fish. And it was, like, dark red meat, and it tasted like fish, and it was like the most off-putting thing.
Sure, was
ever.
a merganser?
No, it wasn't. No, it was not a merganser.
Interesting.
You know, Mr. Benny he eats mergansers, and he's like, there's nothing wrong with them, you know? Like, he's like, just take the skin off, they're fine. So I haven't tried one yet, but anyways, man, sidetrack big time. Man, we got all kinds of stories like that. That'd be a fun podcast episode to do, to get like all of our buddies, you know, and do like a round table type thing where we're just all like kind of telling childhood stories about dumb stuff that we used to do. I'm sure we could source some really good stuff from the listeners on that. That would be pretty funny. I'm sure there's some doozies out there in the audience. I'm sure we got some really good stories.
Make sure y'all check the statute limitations before you write in.
Yep. All right. Anyways.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Where were we?
Well, I want to get to some. We got to talk about opening weekend.
Yep.
Because we kind of mentioned it a little bit, but not really much detail. But long story short, on my end, I'd gone out and scouted Dangerous Club and found a couple different hot feed trees.
Found some good feed signs.
Put Thomas, my brother, on one. I sat one. Mike sat another one. Andrew's stepdad, and then Andrew you did your own thing, going to check out some water oaks. And opening morning, the wind got me. You were
in arguably the best spot
by
based
far,
on feed sign.
Some of the best feed sign I've ever found in Alabama. Just 3 or 4 big white oaks dropping heavily. Tracks
right on the edge of thick cover.
Right off a creek, just tracks and droppings everywhere. Just like what Rick Cope talks about in episode 510. Just droppings everywhere underneath these trees. Fresh and old, but a ton of fresh. And I'm just looking to shoot a doe. Not worried about shooting a buck at all. I'm like, let's go just shoot a doe. And right at first light, I get in the tree and get everything situated. It's all great. And supposed to have a southwest wind. It's supposed to get pretty windy that morning.
Yep.
And I'm set up for a southwest wind, kind of blowing out of this thick cover, kind of going down to the creek bottom. And right around daylight, I'm like, I keep feeling it hitting the back of my head. I'm in the saddle and everything. And I'm like, dropping milkweed. I'm like, it's kind of like drifting down, and it's like kind of going out towards the edge of that stuff. It's really not doing much. If that keeps doing it, like, it's going to kind of probably
screw it up.
Probably screw me. And at 7:30, I see. So I'm hunting next to. We've talked about this on the podcast, but on Andrews Club, there's these mulched areas where timber companies come through and they've cut down all the pine trees that were planted all the way up to these creeks.
They were like reestablishing a hardwood buffer around the creeks, because when they initially cut it, they cut not right up to the creek, but very, very close to the creek.
Yeah.
A lot of places, that buffer strip between the creek bank and the edge of that cut is like 10 yards, 15 yards in a lot of spots. And so they came in and they actually cut all the pine trees for another, I don't know.
It's 100 yards.
100 yards. In some spots, it's a lot wider than that. It goes up to like 250 in some spots because it's kind of a big flat bottom. But they just buffered like around it. And they actually came back in and planted other trees. And there's some willow oaks I think I saw. What else? There's some kind of red oak that I found in there where they've gone in and they've planted patches of trees, sycamore, I believe, all kinds of stuff in there that's going to grow up, and it's going to be like it's going to be such a good area for years to come. And I really, really hope they burn it this year, which I'm like 99% sure they're not going to do, but
no.
I hope they do.
No, they're not.
But if they want to establish those oak species in there, I think they might have to burn it. I don't know, because I feel like they're going to get topped over by other stuff.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But anyway, so I had that close to me and everything, and so this stuff like out in this buffer strip, this like mulched area, there's stuff growing out there that's 8 feet tall, 9 feet tall, like just different plant varieties. Okay, not really any trees necessarily growing out there, like bigger trees or anything. It's just like a bunch of like shrubs and grasses, all this kind of stuff. And it's calm, and all of a sudden I see a couple of them kicking like a freaking like a cane pole, just like freaking fish on. It's just kicking. And I'm like, oh, it's gotta be a deer. I throw my bottoms, but I see a doe browse. I'm like, oh, dude, let's go. And she's coming right towards me. And there's another one with her, and they get to like 50 yards, and all of a sudden I feel that wind hit me that little breeze hit me in the back of the neck again, coming out of the northeast. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And it goes right out there. I drop milkweed, and it's going right to her. I'm like. And everybody else was like, oh, no, it's been a southwest wind the whole morning. And I'm like, I'm in the middle of all you guys. There's no big hills around me. Like, I
don't know where that came from.
I'm like, there's no way it's eddying or anything right here. And I'm like, anyways, and it went right to that doe. And that doe went from munching to like stop, ears wide open. And all I can see is her head and her ears. And then she's like looking like in my general direction. sat there for probably 10 minutes, and she was like, I'm good, turned, and walked right back out. But,
Walked out of your life.
yeah, I was like, oh, dude, yeah.
That's a bummer.
Because I was so confident. I'm like, oh, I got does coming in, guys. I'm like, get ready. Give me 10 minutes. Like, we're going to have deer down. And no, unfortunately not. But you, on the other hand,
Yeah,
a little bit different story.
Yeah, I went to a spot where I wasn't really sure that I was gonna. I mean, I was pretty confident that there was gonna be deer in there, but I wasn't really going to like my cream of the crop spot. I kind of left that to like the rest of y'all, really. Specifically, Mike. I was hoping Mike would get on some deer that day, and so I went to an area where we got a couple trail cameras out. We went and scouted it. Tiffany's been out there with me. She helped me trim shooting lanes and stuff. She helped me put some trail cameras out. We've had some does on those cameras, but we've also had one little 8-point on them. So nothing crazy. But I was like, I couldn't really decide where I wanted to go that morning, so I'm like, I'm just gonna go there. Because I already got a tree prepped. I already know the spot really well. I've been in there 3 or 4 times now, and I'm just gonna go set up for daylight and just see what comes through. And so I go set up. And like I got nothing happening. I mean, nothing all morning, and that was the day of that solar eclipse too. And so we're all like, "Hey, let's hunt during the eclipse and see what happens."
Yeah,
which ended up being very underwhelming. I mean, you could see it; it was really cool, but it didn't like make it darker. Or anything.
No. But I was like, I want to kill one during the solar eclipse.
Yeah, that would have been cool.
Well, I didn't, but you did.
Well, kinda. I killed it before.
You killed it the day of.
Well, yeah, the day of. Well, so anyways, I'm sitting there and it's probably 9:20 at this point, and I'm facing down a deer trail that parallels this creek, and there's kind of a bend in the creek, and I'm hunting that same creek drainage that you're hunting, and so I've got that same like buffered, thick area just outside of this little hardwood drain, and basically what happens in this spot is the creek bends around. And between the edge of the creek and the edge of the hardwood timber is like 25 yards. And these deer are just walking like right on the edge of that creek, and they're coming around that bend. And so it's just like a decent little pinch point. It's not like a hard pinch that they have to walk through, but it's just kind of persuading movement. And I actually pointed it out to Tiffany last time we were in there. I was like, hey, you see how it's just kind of like we were just walking through there and she didn't know where we were. And we'd been in that spot before and prepped the tree. And when we were walking back through there, we got to that spot, and I was like, and she was kind of leading the way. I was walking behind her, and like she doesn't know where she's going because she's not familiar with the area. And I was like, we got to the spot. I was like, hey, stop. And I was like, look around. Do you notice anything? And she was like, is that the tree that we prepped? I'm like, yep. So just you walking through here, path of least resistance, you have no preconceived notions, don't really know where you're going. You just kind of ended up in this spot because the terrain just suggested that you go there. Again, not a hard pinch point or anything like that forces movement, but it's just kind of how they naturally meander through. And I'm like, that's why this is a good spot, because it just kind of persuades that deer movement. And also to people who are maybe new for scouting, that's actually a good way to get started is just go wander around, and just take the path of least resistance, because you're probably going to end up walking into something sooner or later, because, animals want to take that path of least resistance too. So I decided to just go hunt that trail, essentially. None of those oaks in there were really dropping that I could tell. I didn't hear any of them dropping that morning. There's some persimmons in there that were bearing this year, so nothing like super exciting about the spot. 9:20 a.m., I'm facing down the trail. I can't really see like down the trail because there's some thick trees in front of me, so I can't really see a deer till it gets right on top of me. And I look up, and there she is at like 15 yards. So I get my bow up and everything, and I mean, she comes to like 10 yards broadside. I get drawn back. I mean, just perfect. Shoot, smack. She runs like 10 yards, falls over, rolls, runs 30 more yards, and then stops on the edge of that really thick area. And is like flicking her tail and stuff, and then she seems kind of wobbly on her feet, and then like I kind of lose her in my binos through the trees, and I'm like, got her. This is also the first deer that I shot with one of those severs. So first time I've ever shot a big mechanical broadhead ever. I'm shooting the 2-inch cut sever broadhead. And the reason that I haven't shot a big mechanical like that over the years is I'm afraid of deflections, and I'm afraid of being able to like shoot through stuff basically. Because there's actually a good video example of this on our channel from 2019 where I actually shot a buck, and you can actually see my arrow actually hit something on the way to the buck, but I still just drilled him like right where I was aiming. And I was just shooting a fixed blade. I wasn't shooting a super heavy arrow setup. I wasn't shooting crazy high FOC, but just like a good solid, 3-blade. I was shooting a Q80 Exodus, and it'll carry through some stuff. And I was worried that with a mechanical, that same stuff, like if it deploys one of those blades, then you're gonna get crazy erratic arrow flight. So it was just more a function of the kind of places that I normally hunt. You're normally shooting through thick stuff.
Well, let me preface this. It's not like you're trying to shoot.
No,
through,
I'm not trying to shoot through stuff. It's an insurance policy.
Yeah, it's not you're trying to shoot through cover. It's just because you're in thicker cover. Typically, there's always a chance there's that little vine sticking out or something that you don't pay attention to when you shoot. You could hit something on the way to the deer.
Yeah, I mean, and in that video of the buck that I killed a couple years back, he's walking in a pine thicket, and I'm hunting the edge of a pine thicket, and he's like 15 yards in the thicket, and it's all honeysuckle vines and greenbriers and stuff, and I hit a honeysuckle vine when I shot him, and the honeysuckle vine was like probably 5 yards or so before the arrow got to him, and you can see it cut it, and you can see one of the leaves fall. But it like I said, it still hit him. So obviously not trying to shoot through cover, but it's like that insurance policy because I didn't see that vine or I didn't account for it or whatever the case was, like when I shot at that deer. So it kind of saved me in that situation. This spot, man, it was like 10 yards. Really nothing between me and her except
pretty open woods.
Yeah, that is not a kind of spot that I normally hunt, dude. And there was this one limb. The tree I got in was like really, really bushy. And there was like one limb kind of hanging out in front of me that I couldn't quite reach to trim with my clippers. And long story short, I ended up hitting that limb.
Wait, not knowing this until later.
Not knowing this till later, because I'm like, yeah, this doe's finished. And I walked down there to the shot site, no blood.
Yeah, and I told you, I'm like, you should see blood. If you shot her at 10 yards, you should be able to look down and see blood right there.
Yeah, I didn't see any blood. And so I get down. I go find the arrow because the arrow didn't get a passer, so I'm like, I hit that offside shoulder because I mean it smacked. It made a loud sound.
And another thing, when you called you or whatever about it, you're like, I buried it to the fletching.
Yeah,
it's like that is like word for word. I'm like, how'd you hit? Like, how was it hit? He's like, dude,
I buried
it in her, and I'm like, okay, cool, like awesome.
Got her.
Yeah.
And so I go down there and I saw the arrow pop out when she rolled. I saw the arrow come out, but I thought it was half my arrow that came out. I'm like, oh, she broke my arrow. I go down there. It's the full arrow, and the arrow is clean as a whistle, buddy. I'm talking about clean as a whistle. There's some hair on it going most of the way up the arrow, and the tip has just like a little bit of stuff on it, and there's like a slight gut smell to it.
Well, hold on. Okay, so this is a very interesting thing for you guys listening or watching about this experience because there's blood on the broadhead, and maybe an inch of the shaft of the arrow, maybe at that.
Probably not even that.
Not even that, and so you and then like you said that there's a smell in the arrow, like it smelled not necessarily. It had the way you put it is like it's got a funk, not necessarily like guts, but it's got something of that kind of nature on there.
I mean, for sure, like a gut smell, for sure. Not like you just sent it right through the lower intestine.
But there's nothing on it.
Yeah, but there's nothing on it, and so I'm like, well, this is weird. I don't really understand this, and so I just back out. I'm like, whatever. I'm gonna back out and come back in. So I called you, and we kind of talked through everything, and you were like, I would just go to where you saw her standing and see if there's any blood there. So I go back in. And I can track another thing too is I could track her without blood because she was every like third step she was taking was like harsh and she was kicking stuff. She was like kicking stuff out really hard, and so it made it kind of easy to see where she was going. Like you could walk and like kind of track her with no blood. And so I kind of track her up to the edge of where she stopped, and there's nothing, and then there's a little bit of blood. I'm like, okay, here we go. And I look at it, and it's just like red blood, no bubbles in it, not fatty,
not dark,
and white hair. And I'm like, okay. Now I'm thinking I hit her in the leg.
Well, keep going.
So I'm thinking it's like a leg shot, hit her in the knuckle or something. And I'm like, well, crap, maybe I didn't get her because it's kind of like muscly looking blood, and just like a pretty poor blood trail at that point. And the tip of the broadhead is absolutely rolled over, like you shot it into steel plate.
Yeah, so it's a titan. So the severs are titanium ferrule, and like we know guys like Paul
Paul.
Patera, who's been using those for 2 or 3 seasons now, and he's like, dude, I've never. I don't think he might have had one roll of tip, but he's like, I've shot through them, landed in the dirt on the other side.
Yep.
Just switch blades out or sharpen the blades, and you're good to go. Like there's no issues. Same thing like buddies like Jacob Emery, not had really any issues with his broadheads. And when he told me like the tip was rolled, I'm like, the first thing that went through my mind, I'm like, you hit her in the this is just my thought process at the time because there wasn't any blood. Because I'm like, if you hit her anywhere from behind the shoulder to in front of the hip, and it get the penetration you're talking about, bearing up to the fletching, there's gonna be blood all over the arrow, or there's gonna be stuff all over the arrow.
Yep.
You're gonna see stuff on the ground, and there's only like 2 inches of blood on the broadhead, okay, and like a little bit on the shaft. And I'm like, it sounded like just the way you're describing, taking that smell out of the equation on the shaft, it sounded like a front leg hit, like a lower leg hit, where it just like centered the leg, and just you hit a leg. It's what I was thinking the whole time, like the whole time.
Yeah, I mean, I saw why you thought that, but I'm like, there's no way that there could possibly be a gut smell on the arrow.
Well, that was confusing me because I'm like, but then I'm like, if you hit her,
and my thing is like, if you hit them in the guts, they're probably gonna die. So it's like I didn't want to just give up, like on a leg hit or whatever. Like I was like, no, I'm not gonna hunt the rest of the day. I'm just gonna go out here and like really try to find this deer.
yeah.
And because that is that gut smell that threw me off. So basically, I ended up tracking her, and there's little blood spots going through that thicker area.
Just a drip.
Yeah, I mean, there's a drip. You can see where it's rubbing on stuff, where she's going past like some plants, and there'll be like blood smeared on it. And so I'm following it, and then that mulched area that's thick with more like early successional growth then hits the most hellacious pine thicket known to man. I mean, like a rabbit could barely get through this thing, and she went right into that. And so I knelt down at the edge of that pine thicket, and I'm like, man, is she laying in here somewhere? And I get my binos out, and I'm trying to look into this thing, and I can't see more than like 3 feet into it. And I'm thinking like maybe with the binos I can like lean around some stuff and like see further into it and focus, and just see if I can see just a little bit of fur or something of where she's laying. And I'm sitting there for like, I don't know, 2 or 3 minutes. And I hear a deer get up like 10 yards into that thing and just go running off through it. Not really running off, but it sounded like it was bounding, like jumping. And I'm like, that's her. That's got to be her. So I back out again, and I think I went and got lunch with Mike. I was like, I'm just going to go back at like 1 o'clock at this point and just and go see if I can pick up the trail again, because I'm like, I don't know what happened.
Well, you called me again, and I'm like, dude, you hit her in the front leg. It's probably non-fatal, like, especially if you like. I'm like, I was so dead set you hit her in the front leg, just because like the lack of blood. Because like even if you, the way I say, if like you hit in the stomach, you're hitting the gut, like you're gonna have like stuff all over that arrow. Even if you only get 12, 15 inches of penetration, you're gonna have stuff all over the arrow. And because there wasn't anything other than a smell, that threw me off. So I'm still like,
Yeah.
I'm still so confused on the whole situation.
Yeah. Well, so I'm still confused on it also. So I go get lunch with Mike, and I get Mike set up in a different position than where he hunted that morning, and I kind of like show him how to get in there and go over a game plan with him and get him set up, and then I go back out again to go look for that doe again, and this time I'm going into the pine thicket, and this thicket is so thick that I just leave my bow laying on the edge of it, and I'm literally like snaking through it on my belly, like it's that thick. I'm like, I don't even understand how she's going through this. It's and she didn't even leave like a big trail where she ran through it or anything. Like she's clearly like squeezing through stuff. I mean, it is like the thickest stuff I've ever been through, and I get. Dude, I mean, it took forever to get like 15 yards, and there's just a little bit of blood going through it, and I'm like, yeah, I don't know, like there was no like bed in there, or I found where she laid down, and there was just a little bit of blood in that bed. No like gut matter, no blood clot, like nothing, no like substantial sign in the bed that would tell me anything. It was just like a little blood spot. I mean, just barely big. I mean, not even as big as an iPhone. So I'm like, okay, I don't think she's dead. There was a little SMZ that kind of went up into this pine thicket, and the way she was running looked like she was basically going to go around the tip of that thing. So I'm like, I'm probably 20 yards from the edge of that in this pine thicket, and it is so thick that I physically cannot get to that without like a machete, and it would take me a long time to get to it with a machete. So I'm like, I'm just gonna pop out. I'm gonna walk up to the very tip of that hardwood SMZ and just walk like 10 yards into these pines and see if I can cut her trail again. And so that's what I do. I walk up in there. I walk like 10, 15 yards into those pines. I can't find her track, can't find her trail. So I'm like, I don't know. I guess she just kind of quit bleeding. Because another reason I turned around and did that is because I kind of lost blood, and I just could not find anything in there. So I end up going back to that hardwood SMZ, and I'm walking back to get my bow, and I was on the phone with you again, just telling you what I'd found, and I hung up the phone with you, and I take a step, and I look down, and there's a big spot of blood about the size of an iPhone right there in that hardwood SMZ. I'm like, well, crap. So I go walk and get my bow, come back up to that spot, and just track her for like 50 more yards, and there she was, bedded up, dead. And I'm just like, okay, I don't know. I was very confused at that point. The really confusing part goes to the hit. Okay, so this doe was 10 yards, 10, 12 yards, perfectly broadside, absolutely perfectly broadside. Stopped, head up. I didn't even stop her. She was just standing there on her own. Head is up. So that's also part of the equation, because if a deer's head is down, they can basically duck and twist a lot harder. Her head was up, not alerted anything, and so I rolled this doe over. And just to kind of skip ahead and kind of get through this, we ended up skinning her out. The arrow entered at the front of her back leg and hit like her femur or whatever. I don't know if that'd be like her femur. That big giant leg bone, her biggest leg bone, hit that in the front of her leg and angled up and went all the way through her chest cavity, riding just on the inside of her ribs, and stopped like in her neck.
So it's like 26 inches of penetration you had.
Yeah.
After a deflection. Off a branch.
I don't understand how the arrow even did that. I really don't. And we went to the spot, and you looked at the spot too, and I'm like, I don't understand how the arrow could have possibly even entered at that angle. Well, because it was like you shot her like Texas Heart Shot style, and not like straight up the butt or anything, but like shot her at like a 90-degree angle just about, and it went up through her, like, again, just riding on the side, just on the inside of her rib cage.
Let's see, this is the crazy thing about it, and this is, again, there's a crazy part of the situation. You're shooting a 2-inch wide mechanical broadhead. Now, they're extremely sharp, but anytime if you're going to have like lack of penetration or anything like that, and you have like a deflection, like you're losing so much energy, and then that broadhead's opening, so you're losing even more energy, that I wouldn't expect you to get, 26 inches of a 28-inch arrow penetration in a deer. So you actually the arrow did bury all the way up, almost like nearly to the fletching, after a deflection at a complete, almost like you said, a 90-degree angle.
Like, I mean, parallel from where I shot her from.
Yeah, I don't understand how it had had enough energy after it got kicked sideways, hitting that branch, to still have that much energy to go all the way up through that deer like that.
Yeah, I really don't know. I mean, I truly...
Because when we skinned her out, because you saw the hole, like the hole was like right in front of the hip, like right in front of the back hip. But when you skinned out the other side, you're like, it's bloodshot all the way through the base of her neck.
Oh, yeah, a lot of trauma on that side. Like, I was kind of surprised. I mean, I was really surprised at the amount of trauma. Because when I started skinning out that side of the deer, like, there was bloodshot on the neck. And I'm like, what is this front? Like, and I keep going down the shoulder. It's behind the shoulder. And I keep going down the side of the ribs. It's all on the side of the ribs. And then it starts, like, back there at that back leg. So, I don't know. Utter confusion. Well, absolute utter confusion of how that physically could have happened.
Well, not even that, but also utter confusion. This is again, it's fascinating little test subject here, just a scenario. The lack of blood with a shot like that. Like, you were on a little bit of blood, but it's nothing like my experience in the past shooting like a large mechanical. Like, typically it's like you take a 5-gallon bucket out there and you're just like dumping it as you're like you're walking, okay? And this is like, a dripping effect. But even like when you drug her out, there wasn't just a ton of blood coming out of like the exit or the entry hole.
No, not at all.
And when you stuck your hand in the entry hole, because again you can stick your hand in the entry hole, it's like it didn't go into the paunch cavity, or like like the intestinal cavity. It like rode alongside that.
Yeah, yeah.
Went up through the ribs, underneath the ribs, and it's like
I don't
it's
know,
the
dude.
craziest thing I've ever seen. But again, it was good on you for continuing to track the deer, because again, other than the smell, I was thinking like you had a front leg hit, but you didn't. It had a crazy deflection, crazy deflection plus all the penetration, and we're able to get the deer dead. But it's just
Yeah. I'm glad.
crazy.
I'm glad I got her. For sure. That obviously not an ideal situation, but I want to shoot another deer with those severs and actually make a good shot. Because I'm really eager to see what they do. But yeah, not a great first experience with those mechanical broadheads. But part of that could have been user error for sure. I mean, I should have. I remember seeing that limb when I set up that morning.
Have you shot your bow since then?
No.
I think we need to go shoot your bow real quick.
We could. So, anyways, yeah, I need to go shoot my bow.
No. I'm just. What blows my mind still with that is like,
look. Here's the thing, though. Even if my bow was off or whatever,
oh yeah,
the fact the angle of entry just does not make sense.
Well, I know, but see, what blows my mind is like the angle of entry and the amount of penetration had after the deflection is just mind blowing. Like just because I would think like if you hit something like that, it's gonna like lose so much air when it hits there. It's gonna get 6-8 inches penetration. That's it. But
yeah, and also like just for like the bow people out there, I'm shooting a 70-pound bow with a 29-inch draw, so like nothing crazy.
Man, you stretch it out another half inch.
No,
I thought you were at 28 and a half.
No, it's 29, bro.
I think he's adjusting his numbers a little bit, guys. Okay, anyway.
No, I don't know. We could ask old Robbie.
I'm pretty sure it don't matter. I'm just giving you crap for it. Anyway, but yeah.
So nothing crazy on the bow.
Yeah.
I'm not shooting like 85 pounds with a 30-inch draw or something.
God, that'd be amazing. God, dude, I wish I had a 32-inch draw. Oh my God. I mean, it'd be hard to pick a new bow up, but God, dude, if you could do that and draw 85 pounds, oh my gosh.
Yeah, you could launch one.
Yeah. Oh my God. Anyway, but long story short, get it broken down. Took it to Weaver's.
Yep.
I can't believe you're just doing all ground meat other than like steaks and stuff.
Yeah, I ended up taking. I ended up skinning her out. We in the field. We did a video with her on doing the gutless method. She's a great example of a deer to do the gutless method on because shot her at 9:30ish. Recovered her at about 1. It wasn't hot that day, but after they've been sitting there and kind of marinating, like I don't like popping the gut. Like I don't like having to open the gut cavity at all. So the gutless method is like perfect on a deer like that. So we filmed that video. We're going to get that up on the YouTube channel here pretty soon. But yeah, I cut the back straps out, inner loins. I think I cut a little bit out of the back legs, like that sirloin style. And then I got pretty much everything else, neck meat, whatever rib meat we got, front shoulders, and most of the back hams, and ended up just doing it all ground for now. Because I'm planning on killing several more deer this season, so I'm going to get all my specialty stuff later. But what Weaver's does, one thing that they can do is they can cut in beef fat with it. So I got just ground with cut in beef fat.
Yeah,
so
80-20 blend.
80-20.
Delicious.
I'm pumped about it. It's going to be delicious.
Hey, by the way, for all of our Alabama listeners out there and also viewers, if you take your deer to Weaver's, mention the Southern Outdoorsman.
Again, Hartselle, Alabama.
Hartselle, Alabama, Weaver's Meat. You can find them, Weaver Meat Processing on Facebook. You'll get 3 pounds, so 1 pack of their jalapeno cheese summer sausage processed for free out of your deer if you just mention the podcast. So
yes, sir.
Pretty awesome promo.
So do that. Do it for sure. Also, I mean, shoot, if you live in Tennessee, you can bone out your deer, and bring it down. Or Mississippi, Georgia,
There's one listener you mentioned in Georgia. He's talking about like trying to stack up 3 deer, debone them, and bring them over to Weaver's.
Yeah, you can do that.
Driving 3
you can
hours.
Do that.
You have to have it deboned to come across state line, but
yes.
It's not hard. This video, well, we'll have to do another video on that.
Yeah. Well, we'll have videos on how to do it.
Deboning's not difficult.
But I've done that before with Weaver's. I've skinned out deer because Weaver's is like 2 hours for me, but it's worth the drive to go up there. And so I'll go and I'll kill a couple deer, and I'll just put all my grind stuff in the freezer. Like I'll put it in like vacuum seal bags or just whatever I got to freeze it short term. And then when I got like 3 deer and I'm ready to go do like a big order, I'll just bring them all up there at once. Towards the end of season, and that works out pretty good. That's a good way to do it. But yep. Ended up getting that doe, so went ahead and got the monkey off my back early, which feels good. I'm planning on hopefully, like from a meat perspective, I really want to kill 4 this year. I killed 4 last year, and we ate almost all of it between last season and this season. We eat a lot of meat, so I want to kill 4 again because I like having rollover. I like never going without. Because if I only kill 3, we're gonna eat all of it before next year.
Well,
season.
see, mine you got this especially because I lost my freezer with all my meat.
Yeah.
Like 4, I think it's 4 or 5 50-gallon. I think it's 4 50-gallon contractor bags I filled up of meat out of my freezer when the freezer went out.
Bummer.
And dude, just throwing away like whole packs of summer sausage and like 15 pounds of jerky. And dude, it's just, it's sad.
Brutal.
Everything else, and then bear meat. Yeah, just don't want to talk about. But anyway, but yeah, so definitely, a good experience when it came to we're just recovering that deer. I'll be honest. Like I told you, like I'm very glad you kept pushing that trail.
Yeah.
Because I told you, like I'm like we can go get Pepper and put Pepper on it, but I'm like I don't want Pepper to go run another live deer because I don't want her thinking she can catch a deer because I don't want her to.
Yeah.
Like,
it's gonna make bird hunting hard.
Very hard. It made it hard last year, but anyway, so it was good that you're able to get it recovered. But other than that.
That just goes back. The last thing I'll say about it is like you really got to trust your instincts on a track. And every indication was some kind of like bone leg hit. Like every single indication was that. Even the hair in the broadhead looked like front leg.
Where did the white hair come from?
I think like kind of that crease of her leg.
Okay.
You know, but so like even the hair on the front was like that thicker, shorter, coarser hair. I'm like leg hit. But that gut smell, I'm like, there's no way that at the angle she was at, I mean, she was broadside, if not very, very slightly quartering away, but broadside. And I'm like, there's no way that if I hit that front leg, there could physically be a gut smell on this arrow. So I'm like, something weird has happened. I need to keep looking. Because, again, if you hit them in the guts, they're going to die. So, I'm really glad that I found her, man. That was, and I told you with Pepper, I'm like, don't bring her yet. Like, we'll see. If I hadn't found her right there, I probably would have left and probably come back the next day and looked more. Because that pine thicket did get thinner as you went up the hill. So I'm like, well, I'm just gonna probably let her lay up here and then come back the next day and just keep trying to piece it together. And then if I still couldn't find her, I was already looking at places to put trail cameras because I'm like, I want to get a picture of this deer and see where I actually hit it. But thankfully, we were able to get her. So yep. Anyways, crazy.
Q&A?
Q&A. Where can people do the Q&A, Jacob?
Well, by the way, I had a couple guys comment saying the Q&A link was not on the YouTube description for one of the podcasts, I think last week. So just
Q&A link.
Like Q&A form on the
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
The show notes or the description, whatever, on the YouTube channel. But anyways,
I'll fix that.
Yep. So we on these Friday or these Thursday breakdown episodes. We try to do a lot of Q&As with you guys. So you can actually write in your listener Q&A on our website, thesouthernoutdoorsman.com, or go down in the show notes on the audio version of the podcast. It'll be in the show notes with the link there for listener Q&A. You can submit it there. Or if you're on YouTube, there's a link down in the show notes, or should be. If there's not one, we'll get on to Andrew. But there's a link down in the show notes on the YouTube video for these podcast episodes for the listener Q&A. You can fill it out there. And again, we try to answer those, or we do answer those on each week's Thursday breakdown episode. So,
all right, we got a couple. All right, this is from Chad Chesser, and the subject is hunting clear cuts in the rut. He said, I'd like to hear more on hunting clear cuts and possibly touching more on the rut for guys in South Alabama, like way South Alabama. So, man, we got an episode coming out that I think you're going to like about hunting clear cut type areas here pretty soon, so stay tuned for that. But, I mean...
What episodes? Oh, there's got to be some episodes I got to think about.
That are specifically about clear cut hunting?
I mean, yeah.
Who was the guy who was from South Alabama who we interviewed last year?
Travis Lee, I think.
Yeah, that sounds familiar.
I'll look it up real quick.
So he's from South Alabama. Yeah, look up his episode. He hunts a lot of clear cuts. He hunts around clear cuts. And if I'm remembering correctly, his main tactic is he'll go to those clear cuts or around those clear cuts, and he just looks for chasing tracks. So it is episode 432, targeting chasing tracks for big bucks with Travis Lee.
And he's about as South Alabama as you can get.
Yeah, he's way South Alabama. And what he does is he waits for the rut, and he basically goes around these clear cuts on the roads that go through the clear cuts, roads that go around the clear cuts, just in general proximity of the clear cuts. And he walks and he specifically looks for chasing tracks where he's got sets of tracks that are all splayed out where it's obvious the deer were running. And when he finds those, that's how he knows what clear cut to hunt. Now, if you've already got a clear cut that you're going to hunt, maybe it's like on your lease or on your club, I would recommend setting on some kind of terrain feature within that clear cut. So if you've got a bowl or a thermal hub in that clear cut where maybe two little drainage ditches kind of come together and they cut down through that, I'd watch something like that. If there's a big saddle in that clear cut, I'd watch that. Even if it's like a really thick clear cut, like a good situation might be a clear cut that's maybe getting a little thick to hunt. It's getting kind of hard to hunt, but you've got a spot where maybe a road goes down through that clear cut and goes down through a saddle, and you can sit where you can see down that road and you can look into the clear cut. That's a really good spot, like getting in a situation like that. But mainly, just know that deer are going to be in the clear cut, so you need to watch something in the clear cut that's going to funnel them. So, Jacob, what do you got?
Also depends on how old the clear cut is.
Yeah.
If it's from 1 year old to 3 years old, maybe even 4, you maybe can climb. You definitely can climb a tree somewhere on the edge of it and be able to kind of look down into the clear cut. And again, like Andrew's kind of mentioned, like focus on like the low spots, focus on where drainage is. Like if you have multiple drainages that come up into the clear cut at a certain point, be able to watch into that area where the head of all these draws come up. Low spots coming out that aren't drainages, but just like little low spots, like whether it's a little impression, little saddle, something like that. Mm-hmm. But as those clear cuts get older, and they actually are now pine stands, because typically they're going to be planted in pines, at least in the deep south. As those pines grow up, there's going to be a certain point where you can't actually hunt like shooting into the clear cut with your bow hunting or gun hunting. So you're hunting more the edges of those clear cuts. And again, as you're going to hear from a future episode, where you can find multiple drainages coming out of one of these clear cuts coming down to a specific creek drainage, that could be a hot spot to kind of catch specifically rutting activity of bucks coming in and out of those clear cuts running one of those drainages.
Yeah, I love that. That's actually one of my favorite things to do is hunt those low spots in those clear cuts. Because, man, actually that episode that we were recording today, which will come out, it's very like, it relates to this a lot. But we were talking about that, and I was just thinking about all, over the years, like all the bucks that I've seen using those small drainage ditches or just low spots in clear cuts or cutovers, and that's something you want to key in on. So, all right, next up, night sign with Gunner Files. Guys, when you talk about night sign, how do you determine if sign is made at night? What are the clues to tell the difference? I would say it really depends on the cover around the sign. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, typically like
proximity to bedding. Right.
But I mean, typically, if it's like, if you get out and say the best example would be like a big mature hardwood stand where like you got clear cuts on the property, but like you have a huge hardwood area that's all wide open timber, and you start finding like giant rubs and scrapes like in the middle of that where you're hundreds of yards from any kind of like decent cover. Like if you can stand in a spot and see 150 yards and you're not in like the delta of like Mississippi or the any kind of big river bottom where the deer are used to that kind of stuff. Typically, a lot of that's going to be nighttime sign, and especially like scrapes in those locations. The closer you get to that thicker security cover that a buck's going to be very comfortable going through, throughout the day, the more likely you're going to have more nighttime sign. But it's never a guarantee. I mean, there's been spots where like you think it'd be nighttime sign, you put a trail camera there, and you get a buck during daylight. Not all the time, but you might get a buck or two, kind of going towards the rut, and then you get into a spot like where I put some trail cameras up in Arkansas. Where I thought we would have a lot more daytime sign, and all the buck movement, other than a couple of young bucks, has all been at night, and it's in security cover. So that's a really huge aspect to kind of everything kind of going on. So it's just it really just depends on the area, where you're hunting, the habitat, and everything. But the rule of thumb for me is if it's in a very open area with a lack of cover, there's a very good chance this nighttime buck sign is being laid down there. Versus an area that has a lot more security cover, more understory that a deer can use, then there's a higher chance that it could be used during daylight.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. And you can confirm with trail cameras also. And also another thing I'll say, if you hunt like super low pressure stuff, then maybe that nighttime sign, like maybe that stuff you're finding out in the big open woods is not nighttime sign. So it's kind of area dependent, but that's something you can definitely find out with trail cameras.
Also, it could be open, but if it's rugged, like
Yeah.
rugged habitat, like rugged terrain, like steep faces, lots of rocks.
Like what Jason Red hunts?
Yeah, Jason Red hunts. It can be open, but as long as it has like some of that ruggedness to it, there's a higher likelihood, at least based off some of the guys that we've talked to that hunt that kind of habitat, that it could be used during daylight as well.
Yeah. All right. Next up, this is a quick one. Turpentine from James Cavness, I think.
Mhm.
Sorry if I butchered that. Hey, exactly what kind of turpentine is this guy using to hide his scent? He's referring to Rick Cope in episode 510. If you haven't listened to it, you need to.
Must listen to the episode.
Must listen episode. I stay hunting over clear cuts of pines in northeast Mississippi, and I just have to try it. He said go to CVS and ask for it. However, I looked online and found nothing. Help a brother out. Love all these podcasts, by the way. Keep cranking them out. So it is not the turpentine that you get at the hardware store that will give you cancer, apparently. That's like a really harsh chemical. It's like paint thinner or whatever. Don't use that.
It's true gum spirits.
True gum spirits. It's pure turpentine extract. And yeah, you get it at a pharmacy. We had a lot of people write in who went to CVS. Some people got it. Some people got looked at.
Y'all bought out most of the turpentine in the southeast.
I know several people just around here, like in the Chelsea, Alabama area, who went to 5 different pharmacies apiece and just cleaned them out. These poor pharmacists are probably like, what in the they probably haven't had anybody ask for turpentine in 5 years, and now all of a sudden there's a rush on it. So I think the brand is like Humco or something like that. I'm gonna put a screenshot. My stepdad went and got some. I'm gonna put a screenshot of what it looks like on the YouTube video. So
go to the YouTube.
Go to the YouTube video, and I'll put that screenshot in. I can't exactly recall the name of it, but if I can find a link, I'll try to put a link in the description to it as well. But I think you have to get it at a pharmacy, so you have to go ask for it.
Some people have been buying it off Amazon. True.
I don't think that's the same stuff.
True gum. Some of it says true gum spirits.
I don't know.
And actually, and where Mike got it from, did he get it from Amazon?
No, he got it from a pharmacy.
Okay.
He's one of the ones that went to 4 different pharmacies. and Mike was like, hey, y'all should buy more of this.
Let me tell you this. Now, if you guys have a hot tip for you, and actually I just thought about this because I got a couple pharmacists that are family members of mine. If you have some pharmacists, family, friends, whatever, hit them up and be like, hey, could you get me a special order, bottle or 2 of this stuff?
Oh, dude.
If you wanted to try it.
Get me 10 bottles of it. I'm going to start freaking selling it second hand. We're going to get it on the Southern Outdoorsman store.
Slap a Southern Outdoorsman sticker on it.
Yeah, let's go.
That's hilarious.
All right. This is the last question for the day. This is from John Gunn, okay? And this is him going mobile. Now, this is a long question, so I'm going to have to skip parts of it, but I want to read the first part to kind of give you the gist because I feel like a lot of people are going to be able to relate to this. He said, I live in East Texas, and I hunt on a 200-acre deer lease in Shelby County with 5 other members. Everyone has a preset stand location that they hunt. It's pretty much old-school hunting, the same stand over a feeder all season long. That's how we all grew up hunting. Every year we just go in and trim our shooting lanes and get the feeders and cameras going. It's pretty simple and basic. The first year on that lease was awesome. It had been select cut that summer, and we'd seen a lot of big bucks. We'd all been raised to go set up a spot, quote unquote, and wait for the deer to come, and that's how we'd been hunting. Every year it's gotten worse. Every weekend during gun season, we park in the same spots, walk to and from our stands the same way, hunt the same stand in front of the same feeder locations mornings and evenings, and rely on cameras set up in front of the feeder on the same tree year after year. Last year, we got really bummed out because no one on the lease was getting any pictures of any decent bucks, maybe 1 or 2 pics if a front moved through, but mostly all that we were seeing on camera was hogs and a doe group or a small buck here and there. None of us really got excited to go hunt, and I finally just decided, screw it, I'm going to go anyway. I'm going to go hunting anyway, and I will just shoot a pig if it comes in. I get to the lease and went through my normal routine and went to my stand, and the whole time I'm thinking I should have just went fishing instead because we weren't getting any bucks on cameras. Daylight comes, and I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden I hear something walking from behind me. I look, and there was a small 6-point. I thought to myself, that's weird. I've never seen a deer come from that direction the past 5 years of being on that lease and hunting the same spot every sit. And again, just to kind of give the gist, what essentially ends up happening is he has a bunch of deer come in from behind him, and they're basically coming from a way he didn't expect, and he ends up seeing and killing a decent 8-point, he said, that came in and skirted his camera, actually went around his camera. And so essentially his question is there any tips or advice that y'all have for someone who has gone from age 10 to 34 only hunting preset stands and feeders to making the jump into mobile hunting? So I thought this was just like the perfect question for this podcast because he laid it out about how they got a brand new lease, great habitat, and every year it's gotten progressively worse because the deer are figuring them out, And he ended up getting a buck, doing something a little bit different, which is what got him asking this question. But Jacob, what's your opinion on this?
I mean, definitely. I mean, if you've only hunted like this, and this is how we hunted too, like growing up as a kid hunting my uncle's farm, it was all shooting houses, pre-hung lock-ons. Every now and then might use a climber, but it was like you had very specific stand locations. It's still like this, to be 100% honest. Very specific stand locations that you set up on, and you just go hunt those specific spots. And the issue is, you can do that if it's like you and maybe one or two other people hunting a place. But
and you hunt it very carefully.
And you hunt it very strategically and very carefully. And you can have pre-hung spots. That's perfectly fine. Like, I'm not saying that's a bad idea. That's bad to do. It's perfectly fine. It works great. But the problem is if there's like, say, 200 acres is not that big of a property, especially if there's like 4 or 5 guys having feeders out there.
Yep.
Those deer are going to get very keen in very quickly on where they're smelling people and when not to go in there based off when they not smell somebody. Mm-hmm. So, like, the situation is if everybody has their own feeders on 200 acres, which is, again, not a huge property for, 6 or 8 guys hunting on it, those deer are going to figure out when and where to be able to go downwind. And it's just by conditioning. Like, they're going to be conditioned that if they swing 100 yards downwind of these different bait sites, they're going to smell whether or not someone's there. And they might not even blow.
Yeah.
Like, they smell you, like, I'm just not even going to go there. I'm going to go a different direction. So this is like the perfect scenario. If, like, this is the only property you have to hunt, I would go out there on X, and I would mark everybody's stand location. Where does everybody go that has a feeder, okay? And then I would look at the areas between where these different stands and feeders are at.
Yeah.
And that buffer between them is the areas I would hunt. I would hunt in between the spots that everybody else already has feeders at, because the deer are there. They're just not coming to those locations very regularly because, again, they've either been shot there. And the thing is, if you have a big doe group and you shoot, if a doe, there's GPS data to show this. Like when we interviewed Dr. Taylor Chamberlain.
Mike Chamberlain.
Dr. Mike Chamberlain. Taylor Chamberlain. That's hilarious. Well, he could be a doctor just killing deer. He kills a lot of deer. But Dr. Mike Chamberlain talking about a specific collar study they did in Mississippi where they were tracking, I think they were tracking multiple deer, but there was a mature buck that was being tracked on this property, and he would never go to a bait site on this hunting club.
Yep.
Never. He'd never go to a bait site, to the point that he was living on this property. It was a pretty large property, but the hunters only caught him at certain times of the year, so they thought he was a traveler buck. Like, he'd never lived on the property, but he was consistently on this property throughout the hunting season. And the only way that buck got killed is because someone tried to gar hole him and put him in a random spot of the property, which happened to be a really steep face on this property. That was just a natural travel corridor. And this kid shot this buck, which I think was a 6.5-year-old buck.
Yeah.
Randomly. And again, everybody thought this buck was, just a nocturnal, elusive, didn't live on the property kind of buck. And he was there the whole time. He just wasn't showing up to the bait sites where these cameras were at.
Yeah.
So that's a very good chance. Even on 200 acres, it's not a very big property. If there's 5 or 6 bait sites, there's a very good chance there is a nice deer living somewhere on your property and also all your neighbors' properties. Mm-hmm. And he's just not coming up to those bait sites because he doesn't need to. He doesn't need to, especially like if you have neighbors that are running bait, but they're not pressuring that property as much as you guys. Because it sounds like if you're hunting the same tree or the same bait every single time, you don't care about the wind. You're hunting in any kind of condition. Which, again, I know guys, like back when I used to live in Arkansas, I knew guys that hunted like that, and they still would kill big deer.
Yeah.
Just by happenstance. They happened to have a stand set up, not really for any specific reason, but set up really good for a northwest wind. And anytime they had a northwest wind during the rut on a bait site,
they killed a deer.
They'd kill a big deer. Not just a big deer. But they'd hunt it in any kind of wind conditions from opening day of bow season to the end of gun season. Okay? Mm-hmm. So I would just say look at the areas in between of where everybody's stand locations are at and their bait sites are at, and focus on those areas. Because if you start doing that, I promise you're going to have probably more encounters, and the deer are going to act a little bit more like deer. Like, they're still going to be on edge, but they're not used to having somebody in between those gaps between all these different stand locations.
Yeah, exactly. And we got another episode coming out in a couple weeks with a guy who really specializes on that, kind of taking advantage of whatever's going on your property, whether it's bait sites or food plots, and basically getting in the seams between where everybody else is hunting and figuring out how those bucks are traversing the property and not being seen on your cameras and not being seen by other hunters, because they're there. At some point they're definitely there, but they've just learned how to avoid you because you've been hunting the same way for 5 years, and everybody else on the property has too.
Yep.
So this is actually a really exciting situation for me because you've got like this golden opportunity, because you know exactly where everybody else is hunting. You have, like the guy we talked to the other day, you have their OnX. You got all their pins, so you know exactly what they're doing, and you can make a play off of that because the deer are obviously just avoiding whatever they're doing. So, like your search for where the deer are is drastically narrowed down immediately. And if you wanted to get technical with it, OnX lets you drop a range radius pin around stuff, so you can go to all those pins and bait sites, drop a pin on it and say, put a 100-yard buffer around this, and it'll put a 100-yard ring around that. And if you just do that to stuff, this is what I do for a living, it's GIS. You go do that to all of them, and then you zoom the map out, and you're like, oh, here's this big giant area where none of those buffers touch right in the middle of the property. I'm going to go there, and that's where all the deer are.
Yeah.
So
absolutely do what Andrew just said. Use that feature. And that it will, like you said, 100-yard buffer, 150-yard buffer.
It'll take the guesswork completely out.
And it will show you exactly where you need to go and scout. Put cameras out. Do not put corn out.
Don't put corn out.
Don't put any bait out. Like the deer are 100%. Again, I know like Texas is a big bait state, but any deer that's got any age on them knows bait associated with humans, associated probably with getting killed and everything. Don't put bait out. Just focus on hunting some of those areas and try to find in and around those buffers where has like the best habitat features, the best, habitat edges where you have a bunch of different, a couple different habitat edges that all come together, and focus on those locations, and you'll probably have some really good success.
Yeah. And to do that on OnX, when you drop a pin and you like click on that pin, you can, the little information comes up, and if you swipe up, it'll say like waypoint tools, and you can either set your wind direction, which a lot of people probably already do, so you can like set your optimal wind or set it to show the wind at that pin. But right underneath that, it says range radius, and you can go add that circle of whatever distance you want, whether it be 50 yards, 100 yards, 200 yards, whatever. I'd recommend 100 yards. That's probably all you need, and go do that. It'll work out. So I really hope that you write back in and let us know how you end up doing this season, because I'm very curious to hear how this ends up going. If you kind of start getting off that beaten path and doing stuff a little bit different than everybody else.
Don't tell anybody in your club what you're doing too.
Oh yeah, no, don't.
Don't let anybody know.
Absolutely.
Like always pretend like you're going to that spot. Just don't tell anybody. Don't let them know. Until you start killing stuff, and then they're gonna try to ask what's going on.
Yep.
So
absolutely.
Anyway.
Cool.
Awesome. Appreciate y'all watching the podcast. Appreciate listening, especially everybody watching. A lot of y'all been starting to tune in on YouTube to actually watch some of these episodes, and really appreciate that support, guys. Appreciate everybody that's new to subscribing to the YouTube channel. Again, we're working on some other video content for you guys right now. And appreciate everybody that's been listening to the podcast, downloading the podcast, and sharing episodes with their buddies. So, again, if you've enjoyed these episodes and this episode or any other episode, especially like episode 510 with Rick Cope, it's been a very popular episode. Share it with some friends, share it with some buddies. Let everybody know about the Southern Outdoorsman, because we really appreciate that. Appreciate everybody been leaving us new reviews as well on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And just appreciate all y'all support. Appreciate everybody's been buying Southern Outdoorsman hats.
Yes,
y'all
sir.
have been awesome. So, again, been shipping out orders left and right. Still have some hats available. So, again, if you're interested in picking up some Southern Outdoorsman hats, especially as season's getting here and is underway, you can go over to southernoutdoorsman.com, check out the shop page, or look down the show notes below in the description. You can purchase your merchandise directly through there. So we appreciate all that support. And like always, guys, we'll catch you back in the next episode from the Southern Outdoorsman podcast. And remember, y'all stay Southern.